It's been almost 2 years since Sonic Team released Sonic Frontiers, and 2 years later, it has unquestionably been successful. It's left many fans excited for Sonic's future for the first time in over a decade, and for good reason. It's only almost been 2 years, but I vividly remember my very first experience with Sonic Frontiers, diving headfirst with cautious optimism and came right back up with a newfound love for the franchise. I loved Sonic Frontiers when it came out despite its flaws. Sonic Team even took it upon themselves to create DLC for this game, as well as patch updates to fix bugs and refine gameplay. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail over each thing. I'm handling this like any other review. We'll look at the story, visuals, music, and finally, the sweet gameplay. Before I start, I'm going to be transparent. I'm using a few mods here. Nothing serious, just a physics mod that increases Sonic's base speed and makes him accelerate when he's running down hills and vice versa. A simple cosmetics mod, as I'm a big fan of the Sonic Riders designs, as well as some texture upgrades. And finally, a tutorial skip mod, because why am I still getting tutorials in New Game Plus? A quick rundown of the game's story sees Sonic, Tails, and Amy trapped on the Starfall Islands after being sucked into cyberspace. Sonic is given powers from a mysterious being that allows him to save his friends, Amy, Knuckles, who's trapped on Ares Island following a showdown with a Titan when he found a portal to the Starfall Islands on Angel Island, and Tails. Over the course of the story, Sonic and each of his friends help the sentient artifacts known as the Coco relive the dying moments of the ancients' being souls sealed within them, allowing them to pass on. Eggman is also trapped in cyberspace along with his AI daughter Sage, who warns Sonic to stop fighting the Titans. Sonic eventually frees all of his friends. Sonic's cyber corruption from the powers given to him by the mysterious being overtakes him, but his friends give up their physical forms and return to cyberspace, and that somehow restores Sonic back to his normal self. Sage then pretty much goes, "I could bring your friends back and stave off your cyber corruption," which really puts a damper on the way this entire storyline was handled. Even after that, when Super Sonic uses cyber corruption to its absolute max power, he's largely left unaffected even after it shows how fried he got from using up all the power in his super form. Shout out to the Fleetway reference. The group eventually defeats a mysterious being known as the End, and everyone goes home happy. The story of Sonic Frontiers is still enjoyable in my opinion. I love seeing Sonic handle all the conflicts his friends have within themselves on each island. I've always liked how stories in Sonic games alter his character in a few ways, like giving him a bit of insecurity in Unleashed, or being prone to anger so quickly as seen in Secret Rings. But, much like Goku, Sonic is a mostly static character, and the benefit of that is so obvious in this story. Everyone around Sonic is changing, their characters are progressing in different ways, which makes the cast around Sonic dynamic, and it allows Sonic's own personality to bounce off everyone else so seamlessly. I hope we see more of this with other characters in Sonic's franchise. I don't necessarily need to see all of them go through some sort of progression, but just be dynamic enough for Sonic's interactions with them to continue to be highlights in future stories. It's a shame that the cyber corruption stuff fell off towards the end. It becomes the focal point of the story in the DLC, which I'm inclined to believe is a true ending, but even there, it just resolves itself without too much conflict. I guess it makes sense if you say that Sonic expelled all the energy during the final fight so it left his body, but it's still the weakest part of the story for me. The voice acting is worse than I remembered. The game's story is going for an emotional tone, a story filled with hopes for the future and possible despair in the moment. The voice acting doesn't properly fit in with a lot of this tone throughout the game. They sound so subdued, especially Amy. I wonder what the voice directing process was like in this game's development. The only characters that I feel have a decent performance behind them are Sonic and Knuckles, but that's no knock to the rest of the VA cast because they've put in great work in previous games, and the voice work in Sonic Boom is great, but something wasn't clicking this time around. I love the lore obviously. The Ancients being related to Chaos is such a great starting point for connecting them to other things in Sonic's universe. With this game and Sonado Generations coming later this year, we're clearly expanding on and maybe even tying up some things from the Adventure era storylines. I'm curious to see how that all plays out. The soundtrack for this game is not one that I've been coming back to if I'm being honest. I like a lot of the cyberspace music because they all have a distinct electronic style. The open zone music is more ambience than anything, and I'm not high on the boss fight songs even though I do like the ending parts. They were obviously aiming for an epic score, but previous Sonic games did that with a bunch of different genres of music that didn't feel so disconnected. I do like the songs that we get in the DLC for Tails, Knuckles, and Amy though. None of the songs are bad, it's just that most of them don't hit for me. It doesn't help that in one of the DLC updates they task you with finding music notes on each map to unlock songs from the older games. Why would I listen to Ares Island's regular music when I can throw on a track from Secret Rings that properly matches the energy of racing around and exploring an open area with tons of things to do in it? I do love the lyrical version of With You, and One Way Dream still gets me whenever I give it a listen. I don't see why these cutscenes couldn't have been in full screen. Some of the animations in these cutscenes also still look weird, like Sonic's odd looking smile. Outside of that, this game's all around visuals are great. The boss fight cutscenes are still incredible to watch. I love the grandiose nature of these fights. The pop-in is still egregious though. I still find myself waiting for things or having my vision obscured by objects that load slower than how fast Sonic moves. I like how distinct the three islands are from each other though, and while fog can hinder the player's ability to see, especially on Chaos Island, those moments where everything is clear, day or night, are beautiful. They also added a photo mode in one of the updates, which is something I said I wanted in my original review. It takes me back to when I played games like Spider-Man and Horizon Zero Dawn years ago, constantly pausing in the middle of sequences or finding places to take photos. It adds to the replay value of this game, especially if you're looking to chill out as you play. Speaking of replayability, when I decided to do this video, I wanted to find a way to play Sonic Frontiers that was different from the normal way that took me about 26 hours my very first time. I remember seeing a post from an interview where Kishimoto said that there are multiple ways to complete this game and that cyberspace is completely optional. That's when I remembered. Big's Fishing Game. You can access Big's Fishing Game once you get enough gears to access this portal. You also need to find purple coins scattered across the zones to play the minigame. The number of coins needed per fishing attempt scales as you progress through the three islands. The minigame itself is incredibly simple and has a cozy vibe. The number of tokens you get depends on the size of the fish, its rarity, or if you catch something like a signpost from Sonic 1 or a spring, etc. The number of tokens you get for any given creature or item you catch also scales as you progress through the three islands. You can use the tokens to then buy Chaos Emerald Vault keys, which you'd otherwise get from completing the cyberspace stages, except the number you obtain from the cyberspace stages depends on your performance. You can also buy a ton of memory tokens used to talk to Sonic's friends and Sage on all three islands, so really you can just cut your exploration time down significantly. The only problem with this is that finding the coins in the first place might be a pain because they're so spread out, so simply looking for the coins in the first place takes time. Another way is to get lucky and experience a Starfall event at night, where you can farm a shitload of purple coins if you collect a bunch of star fragments and line up the images in the casino slot. If you manage to get this event, you're pretty much golden for the rest of the game. Doing this resulted in what I felt like was a more streamlined playstyle. I'm usually a linear bad kind of guy when it comes to my enjoyment of Sonic games, but I've cut back on that since I've gone back and played some of the more linear games like SA2 and Heroes. As I was playing Frontiers this way, I felt like I was able to enjoy the story enough, get my fill of gameplay in a much more streamlined way than if I were to explore every nook and cranny, do every platform challenge, every cyberspace stage, and then fight every enemy on the map like you're encouraged to do. It turns out I was right. My very first playthrough of Chronos Island took me around 5 hours to complete if I'm not mistaken. This new path I chose, along with New Game Plus, ended up with me getting to Chaos Island in just under 4 or 5 hours. I think I clocked in close to 7 hours by the end of the game, including the DLC, shaving off 19 hours, and it's all thanks to this guy. Since I'm using a mod that makes Sonic a little faster, I obviously have a different experience of what the game feels like to play, but regardless of that, this game still controls like a dream. They managed to make adventure style controls blend in with some aspects of boost gameplay. You can adjust Sonic's speed, turning speed, deceleration, and all that in the menus, but since I was using a mod, I didn't bother. I have used these before though, and I really like the option to customize how Sonic works anytime I want. I hope they keep this level of accessibility going forward. Just running in this game is such a vibe. Running through the forests of Rhea, Kronos, and Oranos Island is something that I can and have done for hours on end. This game takes on a sit back and play feel once you finish the story. I used to run around the Mystic Ruins jungle in Adventure 1 as a kid all the time. It's basically the same thing. Sometimes you just want to aimlessly run around as Sonic and the gang, or anyone else if you're using mods. I don't really like the combat in this game anymore. I don't know if doing the Master Coco trials beat my liking of the combat system out of me, but even when I wasn't doing those, it just felt like a means to an end. They show off the multiple ways to fight enemies on the first island, but then the rest feature a bunch of enemies where you're constantly using the silent abilities to stun them before mashing the combat button. There's an auto combat mode meant for accessibility, so instead of doing the correct inputs, if you mash X or square enough times, Sonic will do his other moves at random. Once again, I love the accessibility here, but even without it, the combat just doesn't do it for me anymore. I'd rather have upgrades to make the homing attack stronger so enemies are defeated faster. They should keep some of the moves like the rebound spin dash attack if you get hit, and the spin dash attack you can do if you successfully parry an attack. Those moves are cool. The spin dash is so nutty in this game. The amount of air you can get by just spin dashing off damn near anything that looks like a ramp once again gives me adventure era vibes. Unfortunately, Sonic in this game sticks to the ground like glue in some areas, so some places feel like good launching points, but you'll end up going straight down and dying sometimes because of it. Sonic isn't the only one with busted movement in this game though. Amy has a triple jump, a hover ability, and her stomp covers so much ground. Knuckles can glide at high speeds if you give yourself a boost, and you can then boost out of the glide for even faster air travel. Tails' flying can cover an ungodly amount of ground, and his mech gets so much elevation and speed it feels like overkill. It makes the sections they designed for the DLC seem so pointless. Tails, Knuckles, and Amy have their own obstacle platforming sections scattered all over the island in the DLC to traverse through to gain skill points for their abilities. The thing I appreciate the most about these is that none of them are in 2D, it's all 3D, which tells me that Sonic Team had to fall back on using 2D sections in places like Chaos Island because it's probably less time consuming to design. These 3D platforming and puzzle sections are fun, but again, once you unlock even a few movement skills, you can completely ignore most of these. It feels like Sonic Team were experimenting with these characters more than anything, because it's truly insane just how broken they are. I get giving the player the option to explore in a non-linear setting means that shit like this can happen, but honestly, I'd rather go back to the formula of big stages with multiple pathways that won't allow for you to just completely bypass everything. Some of the 3D cyberspace stages do this well enough, and it feels like it just undermines the point of having stages in the first place if I can just say fuck you and fly over it all. Even the cyberspace stages are all 3D here. Speaking of cyberspace, I made sure to replace some of these in the arcade mode aside from the DLC ones. I like the DLC stages, they feel more expansive than the base game levels. Some are pure spectacle though, like the power boost stages, but I enjoyed those a lot too. Back to the base game cyberspace stages, they're still a mixed bag for me. I don't have much of a problem with the 2D stages any more than I used to, but they still don't feel good to play. Most of the 3D ones are alright, the later stages like 4-2 and 4-4 are my favorites of the entire bunch. I honestly hope that these are either taken out entirely or at least continue to be used as special stages and nothing more if included in future games. If we continue to get these levels as a main game progression path, make them like the DLC stages. I guess I could talk about Sonic's trial towers in the DLC. Towers like 1, 2, and 4 are less hard and more tedious compared to 3 and 5. I feel like I have to slow down more in order to complete these. 3 was built around a gameplay mechanic with wall climbing. Tower 4 was also built around a game mechanic with rep grinding, but the precision of it isn't the best with how Sonic controls. And 5 felt like a more traditional scaling platforming level, so I ended up enjoying 3 and 5 the most. Don't talk to me about these trials. Didn't enjoy them back then, and I don't enjoy them now. People at the time of their release said these were hard, and I personally didn't think so at the time. I thought they were much easier than the trial towers in the first place, but regardless, these were a chore to play through. I need less of this padding in future games. Even with me cutting out almost 20 hours of playtime, I still felt how long it took me to complete these tower trials. The final boss was also whatever to me. They thrust this perfect parry mechanic on you in this fight, and if you're on the harder difficulties, you'll be fighting for your life. Once again, the spectacle of it all was a great time, but as a boss, I know I'm in the minority here, but I prefer the bullet hell final boss in the base game. The version of With You that plays in the background as this deadly unknown being taunts you for daring to fight it, I thought it was all incredible. However, Super Sonic going all out at the end was awesome to watch, and the ending in the DLC more than makes up for the hassle in my opinion. So, all in all, I think Sonic Frontiers is still a good game. The DLC gave us a slightly better story than the base game and some promising gameplay for future Sonic games, but not much else. I love the ambition that I'm seeing, I just need to see focus, and aside from the actual gameplay, I didn't see much focus in the DLC. Besides that, the DLC updates gave us extra platforming challenges, a boss rush mode, cyberspace rush mode, and these action challenges that you can find around the map that are a fun time kill. I will continue to beat you over the head with this. This game shows us a promising future for Sonic games, opinion, because that's what it feels like to me. There's a lot of things that need to be refined, from visual presentation to graphical environment pop-ins, level design that feels all over the place, etc. For as good as this game is, I can't escape that it feels like Sonic Team was just experimenting more than anything. They put together a very solid game in the process, but I'm expecting a more streamlined experience going forward. I feel like I'm more critical of this game now than I was when it originally released. What are your thoughts on Sonic Frontiers now versus back then? Do you agree or disagree with my overall assessment? Let me know in the comments below. Shout out to you for watching. I'm out. Peace.
I get to go home with you. All the lights up in the sky all the time.